Breeze topic number 3, man. Shooter Breeze topic number 3 says Zionism in Brazil aids in narco evangelism, persecuting candomblé. This comes with 2 attachments. Let's see if I could share this with you guys. No, hold on, I gotta do it again. Okay, so this goes to, okay. So make sure you guys can see my screen as well. There we go. So I'm going to play the first video, followed by the second, and then we'll have the full discussion.
In the north of Rio, this colonial house is a place of worship for Umbanda, an Afro-Brazilian religion. On Saturday morning, Fernanda Franco, the temple's religious leader, gathered her followers to assess the damage.
We're going to put everything we want to keep in front of a house, so we'll be organized when Valori arrives.
A few days earlier, this place of worship was invaded and ransacked.
This is our sacred space, which has been completely destroyed. These are objects sacred to the Exu deity, who has been demonized even though he has nothing to do with the devil. That's why this place was destroyed the most in the temple. There's nothing left here.
For her, this is not a simple act of vandalism because it's motivated by religious intolerance. The culprits left behind several objects as though it were their signature.
This is one of the 2 Bibles that was left here. It means that we're not welcome here, that they want to silence us, extinguish our history, everything we believe in. It's a message.
To protect her followers, she's decided to leave the premises. According to the Ministry of Human Rights, Brazil recorded an increase of almost 70% in cases of religious intolerance in 2024 compared to the year before. The main victims were religions of African origin, such as Umbanda and Candomblé. According to studies, the main culprits are evangelical Christians.
At least 60% of my congregation need to be discreet about their religious choice, for fear of reprisals at work, because their boss is evangelical, or even within their own home. Some of my followers have evangelical parents who are unaware that their children practice Umbanda.
Intolerance is fueled by more aggressive branches of evangelical Christianity known as Pentecostal and Neo-Pentecostal churches. Their numbers have exploded in Brazil in recent years. There were 8 times more of them in 2021 than at the end of the 1990s. For Márcio de Jogum, a priest from the Afro-Brazilian religion Candomblé, the phenomenon is taking on the aspect of a holy war.
Since the 70s and 80s, neo-Pentecostal groups have become the protagonists of attacks and violence. It's a form of modern crusade. There is a desire to occupy a territory, as happened in the Middle Ages. There is a struggle for power, as in the Middle Ages. And there is an economic dispute.
Over the last 10 years or so, the priest has received many calls from his faithful who are being persecuted.
Hello, how are you doing?
Between 2008 and 2013, this man on the phone was threatened by the militia, the Rio Mafia. Even today, he prefers to remain anonymous for fear of reprisals.
Some of my faithful were threatened with large caliber weapons, which looked like AK-47 rifles, outside our place of worship. The militiamen came to threaten us during a service. They were armed and told us that we had a week to leave the premises.
In your opinion, did the fundamentalist evangelicals in the region rely on the power of criminals to impose their religious domination?
Yes, that's exactly what they were doing through the church.
Which church?
It was a cell of the Universal Church.
What this man is describing is the new alliance between organized crime and certain evangelical Christians that's been sowing terror in Rio for the last 15 years. In these videos from 2017, religious leaders are forced to destroy their temples by evangelical traffickers.
Se eu pegar de novo, ou tentar construir esse caralho de novo, eu vou matar.
Nicknamed narco-Pentecostalism, this alliance between organized crime and evangelical Christianity has intensified in the favela complex of Israel, named after the Holy Land. One of Rio's most dangerous territories, it's dominated by the so-called Army of the Living God. Criminals are under the influence of Álvaro Malaquias Santa Rosa, a drug baron who's converted to religion and says he takes his orders from God in his war against enemy factions and the police. He's expelled all practitioners of Afro-Brazilian religions and is the subject of 10 arrest warrants, including for homicide and torture. Victims seldom seek help from this specialized police station set up in Rio in 2018 to receive and investigate complaints.
I wouldn't say that it's more difficult for these victims to lodge a complaint, but there are far fewer complaints, perhaps because the victims are afraid. This doesn't just concern people from this type of locality, but the whole state of Rio, the whole country. People also don't file complaints because they don't understand what's going on. They think it's not a crime, or that there won't be any punishment anyway.
In March, during a police operation, the emblem of the Israel complex, a giant Star of David at the top of the favela, was removed. It's a symbolic action against evangelical drug trafficking, but far from sufficient to combat the religious intolerance that continues to spread throughout society.
This is a candomblé ritual, a religion brought to Brazil by African slaves. It survived centuries of persecution and discrimination before gaining acceptance. But as October's presidential election approaches, many of its followers feel like they've become targets in a holy war.
Hostilities increase when you mix politics with religion. Our temples have been attacked by the growing number of radical evangelical Christians. It's a battle for souls, for power, and for votes.
Protestant Christian evangelicals are Brazil's fastest growing religious group. They have become a strong force in politics and the media. The evangelicals include President Jair Bolsonaro's wife, Michele, and say they're defending the Bible and traditional family values.
Bolsonaro was chosen by God.
Followers of Afro-Brazilian faiths say the evangelicals are also driving a culture of intolerance as the election approaches. The First Lady shared this video on social media. It shows Bolsonaro's main adversary, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, being blessed by a priestess and compares him to a devil worshiper. Last year, Brazilian authorities received 586 complaints of religious intolerance, 141% more than in 2020. In 9 out of 10 cases, the targets were followers of Afro-Brazilian religions. This woman was forced at gunpoint to destroy her temple. Edson is a candomblé practitioner. He makes his living as an Uber driver, catering specially to people who feel oppressed because of their faith.
I know how my passengers feel because I've been there. I've had Uber riders cancel the ride when they saw me dressed in my ceremonial clothes. In the bus, people make you uncomfortable by inching away from you.
He drives fellow candomblé faithful to their ceremonies and shows them sanctuaries like this park where they can feel safe.
Until recently, it was common to find offerings to spiritual entities of the Afro-Brazilian religions like this one on the crossroads or on beaches of Rio de Janeiro and other urban cities. This one has food and it has perfume and candles. But every time more, the followers of these religions are going to secluded places like this forest because they're afraid they'll be persecuted or that their offerings will be destroyed.
Meanwhile, followers of Afro-Brazilian religions continue to beat their drums and call on their saints, asking for protection and peace. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, Rio de Janeiro.
Let's bring in Graziella Testa. She's a professor for the School of Public Policy and Government at the Getulio Vargas Foundation, and she joins us via Skype from Brasilia. Thanks very much for being with us. Well, why does this fear exist and this persecution of these Afro-Brazilian religions? Why does it exist in Brazil?
Yes. Hi, Laura. Thank you for the invite. The Brazilians, the Afro-Brazilians have actually been mischaracterized as witchcraft and related to some things that are not true, especially by some evangelicals and some churches in particular. So we are a very racist country. We have this structural racism that is a important characteristic of our culture. And one of the parts of this racism is the prejudice against the practitioners of Umbanda, Candomblé, and other religions related to Afro-Americans that came with the Afro-Americans that came to Brazil to work as slaves. So we are a country that based its colonization on slavery work. And we never had an effective policy to include those citizens in society after the slavery was abolished in the late 800s.
And have you noticed this intolerance, this level of intolerance rising under Jair Bolsonaro?
It has risen because minorities in general are being mistreated and are not treated as they should. That they are dignity, they deserve rights, and they must be protected. Jair Bolsonaro is deeply related to the evangelical community, and the evangelical community is very diverse itself. It's not that everyone has prejudice against the Afro-descendants, but Jair Bolsonaro has its base on this religion, and it has been growing because of it. So he's not afraid of saying bad things and prejudice things against this population.
I mean, Brazil is still a predominantly Catholic country, but we have seen this rise in evangelicalism in politics and in sport. Why does it appeal to so many people?
So we are mostly Catholics, but evangelicals tend to vote because of their religion. So they are a strong political community as a religion. They have been rising because they, like 30 or 40 years ago, they started this important work in the poor areas of Brazil, and they actually came in places that the state could not come. And they provided services such as provide food to those who didn't have food in those places. They provided some kind of culture in places that didn't exist. And they just occupied the place that should be a state place. And now they are very big, they are strong, and some of them are centralized and they are political related to some candidates.
Very interesting, man. For me, first, we still going through this type of shit in 2026? Like, that's amazing to me. I mean, I get why, because of religion's connection to influence and economics and all that, but we still going through this persecution shit. The Crusades. Secondly, narco evangelism. That's an interesting concept. But anyway, I digress. Let me throw it right to the panel. Let me see. Who should I go with here first, man? Let me go with Sister Cheryl. Sister Cheryl, what say you?
Yeah. So I guess I didn't realize, like, when they say Brazil is the blackest out of all of the, I guess, South American nations. I guess I was just looking for the black people. Like, maybe it's just to my untrained eye. I was just searching for that. But I'm not normally I've never been to Brazil, so I'm sure I know they do have a population. They practice candomblé. They practice a lot of the Yoruba spiritual systems. So yeah, I do understand that. I was just kind of for myself. I was just looking, and I was squinting real hard. I was trying to find where the black people, and I see some right now. I see them right there in the picture. So that's interesting. That's it's very interesting how, the evangelists, I guess, and they separate. Um, I notice how they separate how the evangelists treat them. Did they do that versus how the Catholics treat them? I guess the evangelists have less of a tolerance for their practice. Um, I'm assuming that. But I guess what I was thinking about when I was looking at that is how the evangelism, like for people who are Catholic in the United States, like Catholic and all of that, like how evangelism shows itself amongst the Christian population in the United States. And like you can see, like, they persecute and they put down candomblé and a lot of the African spiritual systems is the same way I find a lot of my family members put down like anything African. It's kind of it's all the same. And sometimes in the States, I'm not sure if they do this in Brazil, but sometimes in the States, black people like to separate the actions of Christians from Christ itself. They love to do that because it gives them um it makes them feel good about actually practicing it. It makes them feel, well, I can still practice it because I don't practice that type of Christianity. I practice this type. So therefore it's okay. And I think when you see stuff like this, and to a lesser degree in the United States, you might not see black, people in the United States killing people for practicing candomblé or, ransacking their house or anything. But it still shows up in their behavior, and that's just as bad. And so, is that my baby? Oh no. Okay. Sorry. So I just find it interesting how, like, this is the best example of how you cannot separate, like, you can't separate the evangelism from like the Christianity. Like, you have some Christians that, yeah, maybe you can make the argument that some are more violent than the others, but it's embedded in Christianity. That's what Christianity is. And I think black people really, we when we see stuff like this, like, we really don't have an understanding of what Christianity is. I'll just leave it there.
Appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. Let's have from Brother Bakari next. Brother Bakari, let's see.
Okay, excuse me. Didn't they say something about a cartel or whatever? The narcos is attacking. But that's what this world has been, in all honesty. Go back to the beginning. It didn't make a difference what it was. People went to war. European people went to war. Europeans and Arabs went to war over religion. That caused most of damn near all the wars throughout history. Is somebody saying their God is greater than your God. Because somebody got the one almighty God, and I'm quite sure people practicing African spirituality have multiple gods, right? So throughout the history of this world, that's what it's been. And now the way our people have been subjugated in this part of the world. Now, they really don't want you to know anything about Africa. That's why they took your name, they took your language, they strip you of your culture, as much of the culture as they could. We still walk around with our last name, still mean ownership. So they don't want you to have anything African. I think they see it as a threat, but at the same time, they also see it as the group of people that stop fighting. We can do this to them, and they're not fighting back no more. We're just trying to get along. Why can't we, like Rodney King said, why can't we all just get along? But for them to be attacking, that's their history. Let's fight over gods, and we're not going to let them. They're afraid their gods, the African gods, might start to give us power. So we're going to have to get rid of the people that's summoning the African gods to come help them. And on that, I hear the mic.
That quote, "Why can't we all just get along?" is one of the weakest statements in the history of all niggerdom. Like, why can't we all just get along? I remember that so vividly. And even then, I was a young fellow, but even then I was like, what? Anyway, Trigger Happy in the chat says you can only protect African spirituality with unity. But unfortunately, when you bring the idea up, people push back and say they want their ethnic spirituality separate from others. Provide triggers. I saw the second part of a comment, but for some reason I don't see the first part of the comment. But she says the documentary highlights how, with the aid of powerful pastors like Silas Malafia, the line between church and state has blurred, impacting the democracy. With that said, man, let me hear from Black Steel next on this. Black Steel would say it.
If you would have put narco evangelicalism on my bingo card for 2023, who had that? Who had narco evangelism on their bingo card for 2026? Because I know I didn't. I'm completely flabbergasted at this very idea of these religious, ultra-religious drug traffickers. Like, I don't think Jesus would be okay with you, spreading poison to the population and selling drugs, right? But yet y'all want to be so hyper, conservative when it comes to religion. There's a saying, there's no hate like Christian love, right? There's no hate like Christian love. When you fall outside of the grace, there's no level of hatred that's not too much for you, right? And this is what Christianity has always done. In the Bible, Jesus talks about, and he sent his disciples out to spread the gospel, and they reject you. You're supposed to just shake the dust from your feet and just move on, right? Kick the dust from your feet, walk away, everything's cool. That's never happened in the history of anything. Even when you study how early Christianity in the Roman Empire, right? So Christianity starts off as a small persecuted religious sect in the Roman Empire. Once it becomes adopted by the state, then there's no longer any coexistence. So prior to the ascension of Christianity in ancient Rome, there were many different religions that existed within the empire. You had the cult of Isis, which was very big in ancient Rome. You had things like, they had the ancient Roman gods and the Greek gods and so on and so forth. You even had Judaism that existed within the Roman Empire. And everybody tended to kind of do their own thing as long as you pay tribute to the emperor. Once the Christians showed up, nah, we're not doing that. So they began the large-scale eradication of anything but their religion. So you see that same pattern. It's not enough that 99% of people in Brazil are Catholic. You gotta have that 1%, which is they don't even evangelize. They're not trying to convert people to their faith. They just want it gone. So this is a problem. I just never heard those words put together in a sentence. Narco evangelism. It's crazy. I don't know what laws Brazil has with freedom of religion. I'm assuming they're not anything close to what exists in the United States, right? Because they've had situations in the U.S. where there have been problems with people practicing Santeria in the United States to the point it got to the Supreme Court, to where they found it was the laws that were passed in some area in Florida were in violation of the First Amendment because it prohibited animal sacrifice. So I don't think the laws are in place. But then again, these people don't care about the law or what it says. I don't believe these, they want to make it seem like by practicing these traditional African religions and whatnot, which to the point, this is a religion that was brought over from Africa, right? But there are some elements of Catholicism within that religion. So the very fact that they still have some elements of, the belief from Africa is too much for them. And it's just crazy to me that they're so full of hate. They're willing to attack these people and kill these people and threaten them. But there's literally nothing that surprised me anymore. Although I will say narco evangelism did catch me off guard. The Christians have been having a rough time, man. Christians have been this past couple of years. The evangelicals have been showing their ass. They've dropped the complete thing about brotherly love and so on and so forth. They've just dropped that from the repertoire. They don't even pretend anymore. They're just like full on butt naked in your face with it. And I guess I respect the honesty, but at the same time, it's like, what are we doing right now? You're not gonna get people to join your faith by killing them or attacking them. But everybody can see the type of beliefs that you guys are about. So what is the end goal here? What are you trying to accomplish? Whatever you're trying to accomplish, you're going to fail because I don't know. People aren't going to be flocking to join your church, because you attacked their grandma because she had a shrine or something like that. And this is the war against African religion has been going on forever. That's why I'm of two minds many times when it comes to this certain situation. Because on one hand, I understand how people are devoted to their beliefs. And I try to be respectful of other people's belief systems, even if I don't hold to it myself, right? I feel like, people live their life and should be able to practice what they believe and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, these religions are hostile, not just to African people. These religions are hostile to us. How can you coexist with a hostile alien religion that is hell-bent on your subjugation? We got to deal with this because it's a problem. It's a big problem. And I don't think that people really understand how big of a problem it is to where, African people can't even coexist. These people aren't doing anything to anybody. And again, Bolsonaro's in prison now. So I know it's maybe been from a while ago. So I'm hoping that maybe the situation has improved somewhat since he is locked up. So maybe things have gotten better for the people that are going through it right now. So those are my thoughts, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how eventually the facade always goes away, and they give you that naked truth, man. This ties into that topic we had earlier with the guy from Canada and what he was saying about basically saying closing ranks, right? This is more of that. The Christian church doesn't even talk about brotherly love no more. I gotta agree with Black Steel on that one. I even forgot that was a concept until Black Steel mentioned it just now. They don't even deal in it no more. And that's all there is to deal in when I was a kid coming up. They don't even, they don't even deal with it no more. And as Sister Cheryl said, you gotta kind of like that for those who are amongst the initiated, the aware. you have to kind of like that. You know, it's just a shame that not enough of us are usually aware. Our ears don't perk up when we hear and see this shit. Anyway, Bonnie, you've seen and heard everything everyone else had to say. What say you to all of it?
Yeah, Coco. I find it interesting that this lady who was doing the interview, she calling 80 million people a minority, you know, and the Black Brazilians buy into that nonsense. 80 million people in any situation can never be a minority. You know, it's a psychological term. It's a psychological term to put you in a subordinate position in state. And I think that the numbers of Black people in Brazil need to be more revolutionary. You know, they need to grow a level of Black consciousness to believe that they could be dominant as well. You know, they need to get together, just as the Black Americans do, in terms of that revolutionary vigor. And they need to have a Bible. Stop playing that game. Stop playing that game because you 80 million strong. You know, and people will take advantage of you as long as you allow them to. As long as you allow them to. Stop playing that game. What's funny is, by the way, let me also say the whole narco evangelism, that is a thing in South America, in particular Mexico. They call them what do they call them? Santos de las Muertes. You know, the saints of the dead. You know, they go and pray to these deities before committing whatever drug acts they need to commit in Mexico. So it's big in South America. I don't know, maybe that's the culture, that's their thing, you know, but they have that in the South American countries. But it's funny. What's funny is this Bolsonaro guy, you know, his Jesus go and give him a 27-year sentence. And plus, what's interesting too is he gave him skin cancer. He gave him skin cancer. The very same thing he hate and loathe. We're playing racial politics with against these Black people. You know, Jesus and whoever gave him skin cancer. The very same thing. You mess with the African gods, maybe that's the end result. Who knows? Who knows? I find that to be very strange. But I think that the Black Brazilians, who are 80 million strong, they need to develop a bit of a Black consciousness and not just not have it no more. You know, you need a bunch of Brother Bakaris down there. If you get a weapon, we'll get a bigger weapon. How about that? You know, and if we can't live peacefully and we can't share resources, then nobody will have it. How about that? How about that? You need to hear. They need to hear how bigger, stronger voices within the Black collective in Brazil, and stop playing that minority game. That's a game. That's a psychological game. Because 80 million people could never be a minority. It could never be a minority. If 80 million people decide to do one particular thing, their voices would be severely felt. So I would just encourage the Brazilians, the Black Brazilians, to not move like that. You need to move stronger than how you've been moving, and just not have it. People will take advantage of you as long as you allow them to. That's what I have discovered in this world. But I'll leave it there, Coco.
Yeah, good stuff. In the chat, Triggers Happy says they need to stop swirling too. If there's no last thoughts on this,
I think really quickly, Coco, it depends on your population, right? 80 million people in most places in the world, maybe it's not a minority, but you go someplace like China, there's 1 billion people. 80 million is nothing. So it really just depends on the population of the country. But I understand your point. The Afro-Brazilian population, Brazil was a destination of the majority of Africans who were enslaved via the transatlantic slave trade. Brazil and the Caribbean. So for all FBA's bluster, not even 10% of those who were transported via the slave trade came through British North America. The overwhelming majority of them went to the sugar plantations in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, you know, Cuba, places like that, and Brazil. So that's kind of what when they say the blackest country. But again, the Portuguese view of racial mixing was not that of British North America. The British, especially in the United States, they had their one drop rule. You know, you had one drop of black blood, you were still black, you know. So there was no fucking your way out of slavery, especially if you had a black mother, you couldn't do that. Whereas in Brazil, in certain cases, you know, the way you were treated was dependent on your black, the amount of black blood in your history. You know, that's why people always say race is a social construct, because your racial background is just dependent on the society in which you lived in. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I too thought to comment on that minority thing from Buana, but I got the, like you, Black Steel, I got the spirit of what he was